morning, everyone. I'm not entirely sure one slide indicates that I'm super professional. It probably means that I may be a bit lazy, but I don't know. So firstly, it's great to be here. It really genuinely is. I've done some stuff with BizClick before. This was a reciprocal arrangement. They said, come back, do a presentation on what the British Army are doing in terms of digital transformation. Delighted to do that. Before I start, I just want to say a couple of things. I'm struggling massively with imposter syndrome at the moment. I'm the army officer in the suit and tie. The bloke behind said, what are you wearing a tie for? I've not seen a tie in years. And I'm in a room full of pretty hip-looking people, and I feel really out of place. But just so we know, I've brought two civil servants at the back that are real hipsters. They're all over it. They're at the bleeding edge. I'm the bloke that's trying to sort out the army's problems with digital transformation from the top down, right? So THEIA, which is the Greek god of sight, is the name of a program that the British Army put in place summer of last year. You won't have heard anything about it, though, until we announced a thing called the Integrated Review, which was a review across government around the security services, but also the military. So looking at how, as a nation, and this is your army I'm talking about, right? As a nation, we protect ourselves and we become independent as we move through Brexit. So there's a lot in there. The single slide, the rich picture that's behind me, to some extent takes us through the journey of THEIA. So I'm going to walk you through that to try and explain to you what we're after. Why am I doing it here? Well, I mean, I've done it all over the army. You know, we do this all the time in the army. Internally, we're talking about this a lot. I've done it at the defence level. We talk about it a lot. I was at DSEI yesterday down at Docklands. We'll go back there after this. I might be a bit gravelly. I've been speaking for the whole of yesterday. So if I start disappearing into silence while my lips are still moving, just wave at me, right? We're doing it here, though, because we need help. We, the army, recognise we can't do this on our own. Yeah? Digital transformation is massive. We're a £10 billion a year business. We're a mega project in our own right. We're constantly changing, and we can't do this internally. There's some stuff we can do internally, like going and fighting wars. That's what we do. But digital transformation is really tricky. It also is important to come here, I think, because the SME community, not just the big primes, which we have great relationships with, the SME community are also people we need to tap into. And some of you, I'm sure, are in those organisations. And it's very hard for you to get into our space because the barriers to entry are really high, yeah? We're an expensive place to break into. And so we're working hard at that. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So what's the need for change? It's on the top left-hand side of the slide. I mean, I don't really need to tell anyone in this room and online that we're in the middle of a fourth industrial revolution. And that's changing the world massively. And the army is having to adapt to behave in a way that allows it to compete in that environment and be successful. The CGS, Sir Mark Carlton-Smith, was talking recently, and he talked about us being an industrial age organisation facing information age problems. And I think that sums it up. You know, the army, in fact, we're here in Tobacco Dock in this ancient building. We're very comfortable in here. 360 years old. We're not a startup like the RAF. You know, we've been around a while, and we're pretty set in the way we do things. So we've got to keep up with that industrial. The industrial revolution that's going on at the moment. And the CGS talks about the gap widening between that industrial age army doing what it does and the information age problems that are growing. And you all know what the world looks like going forward. The other reasons we've got to do it is we've got to keep using that technology to make us more efficient. It's your taxes, right? It's everybody online's taxes are paying for this army. It belongs to the British people. And as a result, we need to be increasingly efficient in the way we spend that money and get more bang for our buck. The third real sort of big macro reason we need to get after this is the army is getting smaller again. We're going from about 82,000 to 72,000. That's what was announced. And we're going to use technology to replace some of that capability. That's a fascinating challenge, right? You know, that's happening across the whole industrial footprint at the moment. As technology replaces people, new jobs evolve, people get different jobs. But for the army to do that, it's a bit trickier because a lot of what we do in the army, as opposed to the other two services, is a wholly human endeavour. Yeah, we take ground and we hold ground. It's visceral and dangerous, and it's not a nice place to be. And we would love to put machines there because we don't want to put human beings there. But the reality is, we're not quite there with machines that can do the real nuances of dealing with people and the complexity of warfare. So there's a challenge there as we transition. So if you look in the middle of the slide, you see three outcomes. THEIA is going after these three big outcomes, and I'll talk a little bit about them first. So outcompete our adversaries. So the way warfare works is normally two parties. There can be more on occasions. It can be quite a big party sometimes. But there's normally two parties that are trying to defeat each other. And we talk about the speed of decision. We talk about how quickly we can get round that decision-making loop, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of different descriptors, obviously. And out-competing them means getting around quicker and making the decision you need to take, the right decision, I might add, before your adversary can do that. I mean, that's a bit like industry, yeah? I mean, that's not really different to the commercial sector, particularly where you're trying to be best in class and you're trying to secure customers and secure margin and growth. So there's some real similarities there, but we do it in a warfighting scenario. The second thing we're trying to do is improve our efficiency. I talked about it earlier. You know, it's a hugely complicated business running an army. You know, there are many, many different capabilities, all of which have to dock together to deliver outcomes. And if we can make it more efficient to do that, then we save billions of pounds over the 10-year span of the budget. So, yeah, there are billions of pounds at play here. We have done some amazing things with technology already. We are already starting to see those efficiencies drive into the business. But there's huge depth. So we're just scratching on the surface at the moment, really. So there's huge depth where we can go there. And the last point is integrate with partners, which is the bottom one, which is what I touched on earlier. And when I talk about partners, or when the Army talks about partners, I should say here, we're talking about commercial partners, which are hugely important. We're talking about our international partners, so principally for us at the moment, the Americans, the French, the Germans, and the Dutch, which is where we spend most of our time and our engagement. And those relationships with international partners are about working together to solve the world's problems. The reality of today is it would be really unusual to see an army go to do something on its own. We do nearly everything in partnership with someone. And as a result, we need to be really closely integrated with them. Now, you know, the technologists in the room will recognize that's easy. We've got open standards. You know, we should be able to do that quite straightforward, yeah? It's really tricky, right? Yeah, so we don't necessarily buy stuff off the shelf. We're pretty good at designing and building exquisite things that don't necessarily work with other exquisite things. So at the moment, what we talk about cold starting, that is you can literally turn up together and get on with the game, is the real goal. And we're working very, very closely with the Americans on that. We're about to do a lot more with the Germans. As I said earlier, the Dutch and French, we've already started those programs. So the idea there is we don't have to spend weeks connecting ourselves up with multiple Babel fish so that we can all talk to each other. We just go straight off the bat and away we go. So a few other things that flow from that I just want to pick up on. It's about the program being emergent and agile is the bit that's really challenging, I think. So the world is more agile now, yeah? So we see a lot more agile approaches. And I'm a really big fan, and we have an entire software house in the Army, about getting to MVP really quick, get to that minimum viable product, get something in the hands of the user, and then let them play with it and build the backlog and iterate. But yeah, that's not something that is easy to do in our procurement systems. It's not easy to do in our scrutinies and approvals. You know, we're spending public money, so actually taking risk in that way can be really tricky. So we've got a lot of work to do, cross-government, and this is a huge undertaking, and it's a British government problem. The Prime Minister has talked about it, to get closer to being agile. And I just love talking to people who do it every day. They just, you know, I get a big buzz from that, but I also get a load of examples that we can bring back in to talk to the leadership of the Army about, you know, why that's important. The other point I just want to bring up on here is about the decision maker, faster, better, quicker decisions. I think, you know, the world that armies fought in the past could be almost decomposed by a group of people. So get a group of intelligent people in a room and start deconstructing it so you can do what we call an estimate process, which is just a decision-making process. Come up with your plan, and then enact that plan with, we talk about enacting that plan with aggression and intent. So, you know, if you did that, you could win. It's just too complicated now, though. The world is too complicated to do that. It's too interconnected, and there's too many different avenues. You just throw a bit of social media in, put some back data in there, you know, we've done this before, we can now go back and look at what we've done before, which we weren't necessarily able to do, except for, you know, user people's experience. And you start to build really complex problems for armies to solve. So there's some technology already helping us with that. We've got an artificial intelligence concept demonstrator, which has deployed on operations with a brigade, which helps the command and control process run faster. And it's fascinating to see a machine replace 30 or 40 people in a room and solve that particular piece of the problem, which is about, I mean, it's quite simple actually. It's like Google Maps on steroids. It's about how you move through a particular piece of ground. You know, with armored vehicles, they're a bit trickier than just driving a car down a road. They're good at moving over ground, but they're not good at certain bits of ground. And so this machine does it for us, and it takes that process from a couple of hours, which is how long it would take for humans to do it, down to about 20 minutes. Now, if I go back to that point earlier about out-competing our adversaries, that advantage is huge. You've just gained an hour and 40 minutes back into your cycle. Now, you can do other things with that time, but necessarily that means you're going to get to the right decision quicker. Okay, so there's the 3 outcomes. That's what we're after delivering. If you look to the soldier walking forward there, it's all about cultural change. You know, we're not talking here about technology, actually. We're not talking about changing the way we do things by the application of technology. We're talking about changing the way we think. So traditionally, we relied very heavily on intuition. Yeah, military intuition, which is a balance of knowledge, skills, and experience that you've built up over time. If you go back to my point earlier about, well, it's really complicated. You know, someone's gut feeling is not the solution anymore. Yeah, the data's going to give you the answer. And the cultural change we're after is driving to a position where we can give commanders, and this is both when they're warfighting, out on operations, doing what armies do, or when we're sat in the UK in what we call a firm base, which is where we train to prepare ourselves to be ready. It's giving them the data to go to first. That's very counterintuitive for an army officer. It's not easy, considering our systems, and I'll come back to in a moment some of the challenges we're facing in terms of being a brownfield site, a really brownfield site. But it's absolutely fundamental to the future of the army. The other 2 services are doing the same. Defence Digital, under a chap called Charlie Forte, are leading the way here with the groundwork to allow us to begin to share our data more pervasively. And we have a lot of data. We've had to keep a lot of data because we're a government department. So we're not like a lot of organisations where, you know, they've lost that backdrop. We've had to keep it. What we've got to do now is recognise that data does not give 2 hoots about the stovepipes and the barriers and the structure we put in place. We're an achingly boring hierarchy, right? You know, we're not flat. We're a bottom-fed meritocracy, and we build stovepipes of authority, and we stick crazy brigadiers at the top of them, and then we have generals on top of that, and it's all very, very boring. But data doesn't care. It can't see those barriers. It can just swing across all of that. And we've got to break down those barriers, make them porous, and begin to share it across the organisation. And the cultural change is the trick to that. And the reason it's the trick to that is THEIA is federated by design. And that's the big red hand. Actually, I quite like the big red hand. I'm not sure whether it's got a slight Russian connotation there. But anyway, the big red hand talks about it being federated. And that's why cultural change will come. So we've learned over the years that even because we are a very structured and rigorous organisation and we follow our leaders, we don't do what we're told. We're quite good at consenting and evading on occasions, but also change comes quicker if you federate it. Change comes quicker if you get everybody to buy into it and lead it themselves. So the problem of THEIA has been given to the leadership of the army, all of it. So it's in the functional leaders who deliver against functional outcomes and in the commanders who are running the commands that we have. We have 2 3-star commands led by lieutenant generals. And that federation is both a work of genius by my predecessor who decided on it, and a massive challenge, because that means that I don't have any levers. Yeah? THEIA is an orchestration mechanism. I'm here to try and get all those people to do the change. Because if we were to try and centralize it and tell people what they're going to do, we would not get that cultural change. It just won't come. So it's a really important part out there. Okay, so the outcome on the right-hand side, I've touched on it already, yeah? You know, we're a step ahead of the enemy. You know, we're working smarter, we're delivering a more efficient army, we're partnering better, we can cold start. How are we doing it then? In a bit of detail on the bottom. So 3 principal streams of activity. I think a lot of people who've been involved in transformations will recognise these. And I might add that, we took quite a lot of advice up front. I mean, a great report that, if you haven't read it, is the McKinsey report from, I think it was about 2018, around digital transformations, where they did a really big survey across lots of organizations that had either gone through a digital transformation or were in it. And they pulled out 4 or 5 really big ticket items that you need to get after. They're embedded in here in these points I'm about to go through now. And we also talked quite widely to a few other consultancies which we work with generally. So we're doing some accelerators. These are just get on with it. We've got to get some stuff done. We've got to show progress. We've got to talk to people about what they can do and help them through the process to get some actual digital wins on the scorecard. I'll talk through each of those sort of in outline. So personnel processes. This was slightly driven by COVID, actually. We used to expect our soldiers, the young men and women who join the army, and just to give you some idea, we churn about 10,000 people every year. We're 80,000 strong. About 10,000 people join and leave the army every year. That's our sort of turnover, between 9 and 10,000. So these young people come in, and we would expect them to conduct their administration online on a fixed terminal. I know this is anathema to everybody in this audience. On a fixed terminal, yes, we still had them. It's an actual computer box thing, and it had a computer inside it. You couldn't move it. It was just there. And they would have to come in and sit there. They'd queue up. I mean, it was ridiculous. They would queue up, and they would sit there and type in, they had to claim some money back, or they had to do an update on their next of kin, or something like that. And then we'd expect them to queue up at the clerk's office and do that, as well as a load of other services that they had to access. That's all now on their personal mobile device. Now, I know that's what you would expect. Everybody in this room would expect that. Everyone online would expect that to happen. That's how we do our banking now and all those things. But it was a huge step change for an army that had traditionally relied on that structure that I talked about earlier and reporting to the clerk's office, or indeed often the clerk, the administrator, doing it for the soldier. So we've moved as many of those personnel processes online, and it's been an absolutely massive win for us. It's allowed us to grow our understanding of our people. So what we were hearing earlier about understanding the customer and drawing in that omni-channel data about what they're up to. We're doing a similar thing with what's called the My series, is the apps. We're starting now to really understand what soldiers do, how they behave, when they want to work, where they work, those types of things. Internet access. So, because we're expecting our soldiers not only to do their administration online now, we're also expecting them to do their training online, their annual training. We're expecting them to access content prior to going on courses, for example. We do a lot of training in the army. That's what you do when you're not fighting. So our people are constantly training. We have set ourselves the goal of delivering free internet access across the entire army estate. So that's inside what we call the wire. So in the camp, every building will have Wi-Fi access or internet access, and every square inch of the camp will have internet access. Hugely important for our people, totemic, exactly what they would expect, but also hugely important from my perspective in terms of instrumenting the future army estate. So we're now beginning to build an environment where we can start to exploit IoT, where we can start to look at the instrumentation that exists on all of our platforms. So every single platform we got has got some form of instrumentation on it, and there's data coming from that platform. And we can begin to learn about the usage of that platform, its state, its health, and all those things that will allow us to make better, more efficient decisions. So that's underway. That's a really big challenge. That's a £180 million problem. But we will solve that. We have got to do it. It's totemic to the delivery of a digital army. Sustainability for vehicles, I just touched on it briefly. We're in the foothills of really getting after what a lot of the big motor manufacturers are now rolling out to us as consumers. And that's a connected platform that makes intelligent decisions and preempts failure. So we really want that. We really want a fleet of vehicles that don't break when we least expect it. I'll go back to outcompeting the adversary. It's slightly annoying if your tank stops just at that key moment when you're about to win. So it would be good to know, generally speaking, beforehand. And you can do that. And we do already do some stuff. We do oil health monitoring and various other things. But this will bring that to the digital age and connect that to the network. The network, when we're in the firm base, we're in the training environment so that we can get more efficiency from the fleet and we can sweat it more. And also in the deployed environment where we'll have more firepower to outcompete the adversary, I suppose, in simple terms. Digital personnel processes, I think I'll just skip over that. I'm going to come back to something related to that. Smart buildings. We are instrumenting the estate now. So we've got some building energy management systems coming online. We have got an IoT project that's looking at usage of buildings. We are the MOD is the third largest landowner in the UK. There is a lot of infrastructure out there, and much of it we don't really know very much about. So we're beginning to build the data stream that tells us, what are we doing with those buildings? Do we really still need it? Is it being overutilized? Could we move some of the usage elsewhere? The field army, which is the fighting element of the army itself, the deployable element, has been doing its own digital transformation. So it's been looking at very much the requirements of how you make sure you train in the most efficient way. So through a number of applications, it's beginning now to digitize the process of training. And we are looking quite soon to bring some machine learning in there that will start telling us the most efficient way to train. Where to train and when, which is the best training area to use, how much training do we need? When is someone ready? When is that organization ready? How do we know that they are now ready and we can declare them as ready to go and do their business? So Field Army's been cracking on with that. And then they're just going to keep coming. The far right-hand side, the accelerators come and go. They graduate, and then we move on, and we'll put another one in. Okay, on to enablers then. Enablers are those things that we can't expect other people to do. So they are very much nested in my space, and I have a lot of responsibility for these. But equally, Defence Digital, as our senior leadership, have also got a responsibility to deliver some of these. I'll rattle through a few, because I'm also keen to try and get some questions if you've got some. So data and skills and culture on the left-hand side is probably the big one. Everybody talks about skills, right? The skill gap is a huge challenge, and it's not going to be closed in the near future. So how we upskill our people, and I'm very happy to take more questions on this, because this is probably the most fascinating area we've got to deal with. How we upskill our people, what we hold organically. So how much do we want to have no-code and low-code capability in the organization to solve our problems? How much higher-level coding do we want to do? I don't think we're going to have many soldiers rolling around smashing out Python scripts, but they would leave quite quickly and get a lot more money somewhere else, I suspect. But certainly we have got the capability to do that in a branch that I own. We have a full-stack software house, and we have an analytics house as well, integral to the army. So we can do that centrally. So that's at the base layer. How do you democratize it? Who is the citizen coder, I suppose, for us, is a really interesting challenge. The middle layer, I'll come back to. The top layer, smashed it. Got leadership all over this like a rash. It's breaking me, if I'm honest. I love my leaders dearly, but they want more and more and more. They are loving the idea that we are going to move down this road. We're upskilling them through a digital training program, which was also rolled out to the senior leaders across defence, actually, previously. And they are showing real leadership. Thought leadership as well from industry is coming, and that's really positive. So we're getting quite a lot of help from industry about where we should be going. So the middle layer is a bit trickier. We're going to put some digital change agents out there. I refer to them as the warm pebbles that will thaw the frozen middle. I'm not entirely sure they see themselves that way. But the idea that frozen middle it's sort of stuck in the mire of work. It's really busy doing its job. So to say, you could do it better, or we need you to help with this, is a challenge for them. So we need to get some change agents out there. We've got a great relationship with industry and our commercial partners. There's about 60 of them in a forum now. We speak to them every month. They're going to come along and speak to those change agents as well. Because I think what we really need to do is ignite them to understand the art of the possible. Everyone in the room here, and most people online, I know understand what we can do. But a lot of the people that sit in the center of the Army's leadership don't really get it. We often say, reach for the stars, and you probably haven't reached high enough. They often are very under-ambitious in terms of what you can do with digital transformation. I'll pause there on enablers. We can come back if there's any others that catch people's eye. They're all the things you would expect. I've talked about Agile a little bit. I've talked about the backbone and the requirement to connect more broadly. And we can come back to that. And then Catalyst is the last area before I sort of sum up. We decided that we want to go after some technologies first. It's so broad, right? The fourth industrial revolution is so big. Where do you put your time and energy? What do you think about? What's important? So we've picked three. They're on the left-hand side there. Advanced analytics. So like I said earlier, we've got an analytics house. We have Sassafire on-prem now, and we are running up into sort of level 3 and 4 analytics. So we're trying to push into some of the A versus B stuff and into the AI-based analytics. And we have got some examples of those running now. We've got some systems which we're using. One of them has been really helping with our contribution to the COVID response. It's a platform called Hydra, which has been sitting in the Standing Joint Commanders headquarters, which is where all of those soldiers that you've seen sticking people's noses, in testing centres, where the delightful young soldiers that are doing that for us, it's where that's all coordinated from. So we've been running pretty high-level analytics on the same data that the government are looking at. We have access to that around COVID, how it's rolling out, just so we can get an idea of how we can help, where we might be required to help other government departments. AI/ML, well, you wouldn't be surprised to see that on there. It's a technology set, right? I do get a little bit frustrated with we want to do more AI stuff. We should be doing more AI. Okay, yeah, where? What's the problem? It might not be AI that's the solution, I don't know. But everybody wants a bit of AI. It is the new black, maybe. So I think, yes, it's a technology. Yes, it's really exciting. But come to me with the use case. Come to me with the business problem. And if AI/ML is the right thing, then we can do that. And we know we can do it. And I touched earlier on the use of AI on operations, that reduction in time to make those questions answered. And then digital sustainability. So this is, the helicopter, I'm afraid, is a little bit misleading. I'm not entirely sure it's the right icon. It's about sustainability in the round, circularity, being an organisation that's, carbon neutral and all those things that we're heading for as part of the government's agenda. It's how does digital get after that? So first off, the real challenge for us is, what is our carbon cost? What data feeds have we got to start building a really clear view of what our carbon cost is, and then we can start working out where we reduce it and how we bring that to a better level and ultimately zero in the end. So those are the three biggies that we're going after at the moment. The rest that are on there, of all of those, I would say synthetics is the one that really quite excites me. And it's probably going to come up later. So it's digital twinning. It's reducing risk in a synthetic environment through experimentation. It's also, I touched earlier on if you want to be agile about how you do procurement for us, it's quite tricky because the scrutinies and approvals process has a very high bar. Actually, if you, in a digital environment, can use a digital twin to show that your plan will work, that you will deliver the benefits, and that would be an acceptable level of proof, that's super powerful. Because actually, the exquisite things we make, those great big rumbly, tracky things that run around the battlefield causing damage and breaking stuff, those things, you can't just mock one up to prove to the Treasury it's a good thing. You can in the digital world, though, right? You can do a digital twin of that, and you can start to build the product that way. So in summary, it's right over here on this side. I'm probably stood in front of it for some of you. What that leads to is multi-domain integration. What it leads to is us being integrated across the whole of defence with our partners, so in the Navy and the Air Force and Strategic Command, and being integrated as well with the other armies we fight with, and integrated across government, as I touched on earlier, and being able to outcompete our adversaries, prove that we're more efficient, become more efficient, and integrate with our partners in a better way. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Programme THEIA, the British Army's digital transformation programme. I'm very happy to take questions.
I told you we were going to have some great sessions today. Another one there. It was brilliant. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you. Right, are there any questions from the floor? Because we are slightly over time. If anyone has any questions, okay. Could we get a microphone down to the front, please?
I'm terribly sorry. Am I over time? That's awful.
Oh, it's all right, Brigadier. You're allowed.
Hello.
Hi.
You touched on people skills and change management a little bit. But given how quickly the entire tech industry is now moving, how do the British Army go about reskilling their people to ensure they're not left behind?
Chris, it's a really great question, and I did say that the skills thing is probably the area that I have to pay the most attention to. So I think it's about our connections with our commercial partners first. So it's about building relationships that are not transactional, building relationships that are truly partnering to deliver an outcome. Because and this is the point, we are not arrogant enough to think that we can do this on our own, yeah? We need to show some humility as an organisation and say, we need to get some really big strategic partners alongside us. And we have done. We get great help for the likes of BAE and Jacobs and all sorts of companies who are alongside us, constantly helping us do that thinking. And then I think, when we talk about going into the fighting environment, which is a bit more challenging for those commercial partners, it's about the reservist community. So we have an organisation called Specialist Group Information Services. It's about 100 strong. They are special reserves, so they wear uniform. with a putative rank. It doesn't really matter what their rank is, to be honest. And they are all leaders in their field. So from BT, for example, we have their lead architect for 5G is a captain in SGIS. And he comes and he helps us understand the problem and take us through the journey. I think we'll see more of that in terms of specialist advice. And then ultimately, we will see more reservists being in a role which is a technical role. So working in the cyber environment, working in the deep technology environment, working with us on data and data analytics. And they will do that as a part-time job because I mean, I've done it for 30 years. It's a really cool organization, right? We do some great stuff. I mean, people might think it's a bit boring in the army, and it can be at times. But 90% of the time, it's brilliant. You know, it's a lovely place to work. Come and join us and maybe get a different experience for 2 or 3 days a month. I mean, the German army have done quite a bit of that. I know the Americans do it great with their reservists, and we'll be doing the same.
Okay, great. You've answered a lot of the questions that have come in on here, but I just wanted to mention one thing. You talked about procurement there and the rather convoluted and intricate process in terms of approvals. You also said that you were looking for SMEs to partner with and suppliers. Yeah. So because it sounds like quite a daunting prospect for an SME, so how are you encouraging them to work with you?
It's a great question, thank you, and it's really helped me to make a point that I probably should have made in the speech, so I'm grateful. So we've stood up a thing called the Army Battle Lab, which is an experimentation environment. So the Battle Lab is completely funded, so there's no cost to people to come and use it. So thankfully, some big strategic partners have done all the upfront costing, so it's fully ready to go. And all the facilities you would expect there in terms of there's a DevSecOps platform, there's a network there, there's a 5G node, it's connected to a thing called the Land Systems Reference Center, which is where all our systems, physical systems sit at the moment, which therefore you need to reference against them to make sure you can operate on them, things like our radio networks and stuff like that. So the Battle Lab is the first answer to the question. So SMEs will I think, be comfortable coming to that environment. The second part of the question is, I laid the challenge down yesterday at DSCI actually in a panel there. The second part of the solution is the primes. So primes stop behaving in a way that maybe tries to consume SMEs, but work with SMEs and bring them along on the journey. Because all the big players that I talked to, and I spoke to nearly all of the big tech companies yesterday in one way or another that are involved in defence, all realise that they can't solve the problem on their own. That, actually, the multiple different capabilities you need to bring to bear to solve some of our problems or deliver some of the capabilities we want to win require quite a smorgasbord of different skills. And many of those are resting in SMEs because that's where people want to work and those firms are the best place for them because they're agile, they're quick, they can move fast. So I think the second half of the equation is primes. The third half of the equation is us transforming how we do experimentation at the next level up above the Battle Lab. So we run a thing called the Army Warfighting Experiment every year. It's a massive undertaking. It's now going on to more of what we call a programmatic footing. So we'll be able to advertise well in advance over many years what will be happening in that program on the way through, which will allow SMEs to line themselves up against the right bit for them. So for example, next year, we think it'll be networks will be what we're looking at. So we'll be going on to Salisbury Plain or some training area somewhere, I don't know where actually, and we will invite people to come along and show us what they can do. And I think that will become more accessible for SMEs as it goes on to, as I say, a programmatic footing because there'll be lead time rather than it was an annualized process, bookended. And if you're not a multi-billion-pound prime, you can't build yourself into it. You can't get onto the train. You can't run fast enough to jump on the train, I think someone said, which I think is a bit unfair. I think SMEs could run quite quick, actually, if they wanted. But that's the third part of the equation. So I think that's where we're going. We hope that'll work. The DCGS, as you know, when you did that really kind article for us, the DCGS, so the Deputy Commanding General of the Army, he said that he thinks that's the biggest piece to unlock our digital transformation. He sees that as the biggest challenge. So we are paying attention to it because he's the boss.
Okay, a good place to stop. We are over time, but thank you very much. Another brilliant session. Thank you, Brigadier Stefan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.